Hello, everybody. Today, we're gonna make a video, and so I'm just gonna introduce myself first of all. My name is JC. I'm an independent filmmaker slash author, and just since I have a chance, I'm gonna promote my book. Here it is, Beyond the Black. Please get it on Amazon. It's available on every Amazon store in the world. So in India, in Canada, wherever you have Amazon, you can get the book. I do like nature and science, and we're going to talk about climate change today. But I just want to make sure, first of all, for my part at least, that I'm not what you would call an expert, but I consider myself scientifically literate. So I can talk about the topic. And I know quite a lot actually about it. And today joining me is Saurav. He is from India, and you're in high school biology teacher, right?
Yeah, right, right,
So high school biology teacher. He's a nature lover, a science enthusiast. You actually worked in many parts of India, right?
right. Across, I had all kind of experience from the villages side, and then in the city schools, have seen the differences in a by very close look. I have seen that, and basically, I am working with the education systems as such to know and understand better that how the education can be improved with better, techniques.
So let me ask you the first question, and this is not related to climate change just yet. So obviously you're a biology teacher, and we know that there are other sciences out there like physics, chemistry, geology, etc. So why did you choose biology specifically?
Okay, it started from very early age, like in class eighth only. So from eighth onwards, I have that inclination of in particularly in science, and now we are bifurcating into physics, chemistry, and bio. But if I see as a whole, I can integrate much more. I can understand the nature from the very early age. I was a nature lover, that to protect and conserve the nature, and that was very inherent by looking the surroundings by which the humans were deteriorating the surroundings, and that made a lasting impact. That can I do something for the nature? So when I talk about nature, so obviously I have to talk about the biological beings, and in that way I try to study more often about the species, various kind of species. I also introduced the concept of photography in learning and studying. So that made me much more interested to go beyond the textbook. And after class 10th and school life, when I entered into the college life, the horizon was very wide in that aspect because I had to go into the research field. And when I stepped into the research field of biological sciences, it made me, it gave me so much of happiness that I thought, why not to, give this treasure of biology to my students. And that's how I'm still being associated, with biological sciences. And not only I'm denying the fact that biology is not only biology, but we have to take consideration of the other science fields also, like physics and chemistry, because ultimately it's going to be the overall science by which the humanity can change.
So basically, there is this group on Facebook called Atheist Republic, and I believe now it's a closed group because obviously they are scared that, well, look, I mean, we know how Facebook works. There are some people who can come in and maybe they post some kind of horrible things like child pornography or something like that. And then the group that gets taken down because obviously, right? So it's a closed group, but I haven't seen any controversial posts on it. Okay, so there's nothing controversial there. It's just people who are living in many countries in the world and they're expressing their views on atheism, which is perfectly reasonable as far as I'm concerned. So one thing I would like to start here is that actually, if you read the Christian Bible in the King James version, I believe this is verse 26 to 28 or something like that. It says basically, God, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that is creepeth upon the earth. Okay, so that's kind of too much text there, but the idea here is that religion kind of put man at the top of the pyramid, and today it's a big problem. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, integrating religion in science, I always try to avoid because there are people who says that if you integrate religion with science, both ways can go very smoothly with each other. But I don't see it because the when we talk about the rational part of science, and it's much more objective than the religious beliefs and the faiths. So I don't see, and there are many different, I mean, religions. They do have their own beliefs, and they're based on that. The belief systems is actually proceeding forward. And whenever the belief system, there are too many belief systems. Obviously, there would be clashes, and those clashes are actually causing large scale human destruction, which I believe. And there may be proponents which says that religions is for good, but I don't think so. If religion is not there, then also the world can be good. It's not like that. With the religion also the humanity can move ahead. It's not like that. Yeah, there may be a tool by which the humanity can progress, but without it, with science also, objectively and rationally, I don't think so. I mean, that's the only route. Religion is the only route to go beyond a certain limit. It can be science also. So for me, religion and science, they can go together unless and until they don't join hands together, because at that point it goes as pseudo scientific theories which are actually coming out. So that's what my point, with respect to, I keep the two things separate, religion and science.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I agree. Yeah. So today we kind of agreed to meet on this video to talk about mostly about climate change and a little bit about capitalism and also vegetarianism and GMOs, etc. And also we will finish by talking about future solutions, and I would be interested actually to hear later what you have to say, because obviously I have my set of solutions and you probably have yours. So first of all, let's just kind of frame climate change. So climate change is not a hoax, okay? It is really happening. It's impacting a lot of societies, which are generally, the poor are more affected than the rich, obviously, because the rich have the ability to get out of harm's way. They have the ability to move somewhere else, to eat something else. But the poor people don't have that kind of opportunity. And we actually see that today with COVID. If you're a rich person, you can wear a mask and you can self-distance. But if you're a poor person, you often just don't have the resources to do that. So what would you say? So if people ask you, like on the street, for example, just what is climate change? How would you answer them?
There are two aspects for it. I mean, there is a climate and it is changing. That's one thing we have to understand, because our own greed, the things are getting changed. And change, I don't think so it's bad. Change, it is happening evolutionary. It's being changing from very early stage to now. The climates, they are changing. Okay, that's, we cannot deny it. But the problem is how faster it's going to change nowadays. And that makes me worried because of the rapid changes which are happening throughout the world because of the human activities. That's a very serious issue to ponder upon, because if we don't do it now, after say suppose 20 years or 30 years, the world which we are living in, it would be inhospitable to live. And that worries me the most, because the resources which we are using, I am considering about the non renewable resources of energy, and the consumption by which the population and the consumption by which they are being depleted day by day. It's a very worrisome thing to think about. So as for me, it's being happening in the background. we are thinking only because of our basic needs. We are thinking that we are living in a very happy place. But if you go and look into the background, the things are getting worsening. And sooner or after, the human will understand that it's not after once everything it gets finished, they will only left with the money. And if they leave left with the money, what they will do with that money, because the resources are not there, isn't it? So I think that point should not reach, and we should think some alternative by which the rate by which the climate change is being happening, it should be having some kind of pause. So the strategy and techniques by which we can do that, full stop. That okay, the things change will happen, but it should decrease in its rate.
Right, right. So yeah, in my case, like if people ask me, then I would basically describe it as people have to understand the difference between climate and weather, because usually people really can't tell the difference. And so weather is usually what we see on the television at night on the news. It's a prediction of the weather tomorrow or maybe a week ahead at best. But climate is basically weather, but accumulated over very, very long periods of time. We're talking like 30 years or at least 30 years. So first of all, I wanted to touch a bit about the economy. And this is kind of an interesting point because I come from the US, you come from India. Both countries have a lot of problems right now, let's be honest there. And capitalism seems to be at the center of a lot of problems these days. And it seems that people are stuck thinking about, okay, capitalism or communism, and it seems that there is nothing else that exists out there. But that's not true, first of all. And so, in your case, of course, India was a colony of the British Kingdom for a very long time. So, what has been the effect of capitalism in India?
I think as a democratic country, we prefer the people's choice. That's one thing we know. But when any people choose a government, so the best thing is that government should give that confidence to the people. But what happens is that in the democratic system, the people actually after when once they choose the government start giving preference to the capitalist people, and that's where the whole problem it starts. Because if you give power, you are elected by the people to be in the power, and then you are handing over those power to rule the common masses with the help of capitalist people. So that particular thing should be minimized, because if you don't minimize it, what happens is that capitalist or the capital will go to some people, and it will not reach to all the sectors of the people. So what I think is that there is a need of capitalism. We cannot deny it, because everything requires some capital investment. And if you don't do that, then there will be no progress. But how much of capital they should be provided to some group of people or to distribute among all of us is one thing we have to be very, we have to be very thankful about it. So, in my case, in our place, what's happening is that the same kind of problem which emerges between the poor and rich, the division, and that division, it's day by day increasing. And when you have a lot of resources, a lot of capital in one hand, and in the other hand, if you don't have anything, so what happens is that they can manipulate the nature, because they want the benefit out of that capital. If they are investing something, so they have to get something out of it. And in that aspect, what happens is that a lot of urbanization, lot of construction, and the people are living in the streets. They are very hungry, they are poor. But in the other hand, we have big malls, big establishments, right? So this one particular, the distribution of the capital and resources is one of the problem in India, which I think should be settled by some government which can come and then make some effective plans to do that proper distribution. What about you? I mean, in your country, what's going on?
So yeah, in America, what's very kind of an open fact is that the very rich corporations have a lot of power, and they essentially, for example, when it comes to climate change, they actually spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year trying to basically, buy certain people, and these people will attack the science. And this is the best way to not do anything, because if you create this kind of feeling that, well, maybe the science is not very clear, so people have this concept that, well, maybe then I don't have to do anything about it, right? So that's a very dangerous position. And of course, we have a lot of money in politics. And, since I'm a kid, I keep hearing, oh, we need to take the money out of politics. I've been hearing that for 30 years, and nothing has changed. Nothing. They're still in power. They still have so much money. And it's true that capitalism creates a very small group of very rich people, but it creates a very large group of people who, well, like you said, basically have very little or nothing even. So,
One more problem I think is in our country is that we give too much of capital in election. So a lot of capital goes in the election process, and that's where I think, I mean, the party, they give a lot of funds and all this thing. I don't think so. That's the people's money, and for a process of election, if you are investing so much of capital, then I don't think so that would be a better idea for future. I mean, because that capital can be used for better construction, or some other purposes. That's what also there in India, which is one point which I can raise.
right, right. And also, I think, well, the last time we talked, we mentioned a bit of corruption, and obviously, in the
Mm,
States, there's also a lot of corruption. But so in India, you said people are also very actively, basically,
right,
buying out
right.
the system. So, also
I
talk,
mean, the corruption is there, but how much level of corruption in each countries, that's a very, I can say we cannot predict it, because
right,
in which level the corruptions are happening, we don't have a clear idea. And we can only talk about our own country, but not other country, how much they are involved in corruption.
right,
So that's again a very abstract thing to discuss about level of corruption.
yeah, yeah. And just to touch a bit upon history here, when it was the days of the British Empire in India, would you say that there was no corruption? I mean, obviously there was always some corruption, I guess, but would you say there was less corruption then than now?
Because I was not in that era. So yeah, based on the books, I mean, whatever I have written, read the history books. I mean, corruption level was there at that time also, but the degrees by which I can compare is very abstract. I can't, because I was not in that era to check how much corruption level was there. And even I have read historical backgrounds, I mean, a very early stages. And whenever I read the history books, it all talks about that how we get independence, but not too much into the intricacies that how the, I mean, British, obviously there were some rulers in our country who actually gave some corruption, and then to the Britishers, and then Britishers got the advantage from those rulers and then started their own establishment in India. And that's how the East India Company, the Britishers, they actually came over in India and then did the establishment. So corruption was there. But in that case we were the princely states. That means we were bifurcated into around 350 princely states at that time when Britishers actually came. And it was very obvious because I mean, Britishers had a lot of capital, so they were actually establishing not only in India but throughout the Asia. So one point was there in India. So obviously, some of the rulers, they gave some corruption so that the East India Company can just get the establishment and start, expanding their, what you called capital in throughout the country, because our country was very rich in resources. I mean the raw resources I'm talking about. So though they took the raw resources, and we left out with hardly very few resources now, and that's what we are fighting now. So it's already done.
And there's kind of a interesting historical point just to finish on that. With Winston Churchill, a lot of people in Europe have this image of Winston Churchill like, oh, he's the ultimate British gentleman, etc. But excuse me, he was responsible for a huge famine in India, which is responsible for at least 10 million deaths. So yeah, he did that. We talked about that in the last conversation we had, but the basic idea was that in most countries in the world, vegetarianism is not really widespread. So I actually found some statistics here, and just let me pull that up here. Basically, it's a percentage of vegetarian diet per country, and this is on Wikipedia, so you can look it up. So even if you look at the best case examples in Mexico, it's only 9%. Poland is in second place, 7%. And then it goes like 5 for, in Japan is 2.7%. So this is a huge problem. So in India, tell me a little bit about Indian food. And is Indian food vegetarian, or what do they eat there?
We have mixed, nutrition. Normally, people over here where I am living, most of the people they prefer vegetarianism. So they like vegetarian food. So we have more number of vegetarian outlets. The place where I'm living, that's in Bangalore. Most people they prefer to be vegetarian here because of their religionism. That's again it's bit related to the religion, I believe. In Hindu culture, I mean, eating beef is banned, right? They can't eat beef. That's a holy animal for them. And for Muslims, pork is again a very bad thing. I mean, they can't consume pork. So if we see overall a scenario of the red meat consumption in India, I would say that it's less in India because of the religion which actually comes to this point. Other than that, the chicken and the fishes are being widely we take different type of foods related to the chicken and fishes. Recently, we are also very much interested in the mushroom cultivation. There are some research centers who are actually working with the mushrooms, cultivation of mushroom, production of mushroom. So I do see that there is a shifting of moving from the non-vegetarianism to the vegetarianism with an alternative source of mushroom. Now, mushroom, I can't say that whether it's a vegetarian or it's a non-vegetarian, because that's a thin line where you cannot say that mushroom is non-vegetarian or vegetarian. But people do refer a mushroom as vegetarian food because it's not moving. So that's something. But most oftenly in the Indian restaurants, if we go, there both the things are being served. Mostly the chicken is being served in most of the Indian restaurants. Other than that, chicken and fish are the main thing, sources of non-veg, and we takes a lot of vegetables because in our tropical area, we are living in the tropical area, so a lot of vegetables are being grown here. So that's what. So I can tell you the ratio of 1:3. I mean, people who are, having the non-vegetarian versus vegetarian. How about in your country? How's the ratio? I mean, vegetarian and non-vegetarian. And also, you have to tell me about, I mean, how getting into the vegetarianism leads to, decreasing the global warming, because I want to know that relation.
Well, I can speak for two countries because obviously I come from the States, but I live in Japan actually. So in the States, people really love the meat, like barbecue is, people love barbecue, etc. So unfortunately, there is that problem. In Japan, it's more kind of a fish-based diet, so people eat a lot of chicken. But in the supermarket, you get everything. You get lamb, you get pork, you get beef, and fish as well. So people in Japan actually love beef, and to me that's a big problem. Obviously, I will talk about that in a second. So the main issue with meat is that it needs a lot of, so the animals like cows and pigs, they need a lot of land actually to live on. And I found this. This is also from Wikipedia. This is called the environmental impact of meat production, and it says here that the land use in so meter squared year per 100 grams of protein for lamb and mutton, it's 185 so squared meters. For beef, it's 164 squared meters. But if you compare that to chicken, chicken is only 7. So this is a huge difference here already just on land use. And of course, as you are aware, in many countries, like in Brazil, for example, they are destroying the Amazon forest because they're trying to basically build more farmland there. And this is bad on so many points because you're destroying the lungs of the planet, and you're basically focusing on only short-term profits. This is great for tomorrow, but in the long picture, in the big picture of climate change, it's a terrible idea. And of course, also the other thing you have to consider is that a lot of the current farmland which is being used, we grow food just so that pigs can eat it or cows can eat it. And a lot of the areas are actually just used for that, so we can feed the livestock. And of course, and also on top of that, you have to consider that we have to transport it. We have to, people have to get it. People have to transport it, and all of that is not green. None of that is by electric vehicles. So I would say that is the main problem.
Yeah, I have a issue. I mean, in this, I would you like to point it out. Like in case of Amazon, there are some, cultivation of the palm oil, which I was seeing a documentary on it. So yeah, a lot of palm oil and palm trees are being also deforested for the benefits of getting the palm oil. That's one thing. So deforestation, whether it's from animals or from plants, it's being happening, and that should be the concern. Secondly, if we talk about the transportation, so vegetables and the fruits are also being transported. So how do you see this particular comparison, transporting animals and transporting various kind of vegetables and fruit throughout the not only export but also they are importing right from different countries. So how do you see that?
I would just actually, for a second here, I would go back to talking about the coronavirus. There's a good analogy here. I think people kind of mistakenly think that, um, it's you get the flu or the coronavirus. And actually that's a wrong way of thinking. It's not one or the other, it's one and the other. So your chances of dying are actually increasing, unfortunately. So by the way, I hope everybody's staying safe. That's very important to say. I would say that we basically we should try to reduce the amount of transportation that goes on, the amount of land use, again, because a lot of forests are destroyed, etc. It's true that actually palm oil, as you mentioned, is a huge issue. They're also doing that in Indonesia, by the way. They destroyed vast amount of rainforests there as well, just to plant palm oil trees. And people actually, just to kind of finish on that point, people might think, oh, but palm oil is a tree, right? So it's good, right? Come on. Actually, that is not the case, because palm oil trees are not good to capture the CO2 in the atmosphere. They're really terrible trees for doing that. Some trees are just not good for certain things. So I would say we just have to try to reduce these amounts of meat consumption and transportation.
And one more thing, I mean, I got your point. One more thing that I mean, as a scientist, because scientists are actually ruled by the government, frankly speaking, isn't it? So if the people who are we are representing to make the government, if they don't understand what's climate change, then there is a big problem, because most of the funds, we know that they are going into the corporates for their, getting the products. But how much of, the, I mean, countries are spending on the environmental research? Very few. I can just count any country, and then you will see that the amount of expenditure they are putting in for environmental engineering is very less. So I think still the people and the government, they are not very fully aware about the changes are already very detrimental to the environment. And if this particular message is not properly reached into the government, then that tussle will always there, because the deforestation is not being done by the tribal people, because tribal people, they actually protect it. It is always the capitalist who want to get the benefit out of the natural resources. And until and unless they don't understand it, the whole purpose, there would be, and people are not, taking a stronghold in the agitation while doing the environmental changes. We do see some of the, in some people, they raise their, with their slogans, to protect the environment. But how many? That's the question, because we are so much busy with our daily routine life, and that's the whole point about it. It's just neutralize everything, all the discussions, isn't it?
I agree, and that's a very good point. I think I always called it kind of the trap of life because we, well, basically we have to survive, and so how do we do that? We need a job, and we get paid. And unfortunately, a lot of the jobs, at least they pin you down for 40 hours a week. That's the minimum. Okay, usually people work more. If you're a doctor, you work way more than that. One solution, we're going to talk about solutions later, but to this particular problem, one solution I would say is maybe to consider something like a UBI. It's a universal basic income. So what happens is that basically everybody in the country, everybody with no exception, everybody in the country every month gets a certain amount of money. Let's say, I don't know, because in India, I'm not sure about the exchange rate, but let's say in America everybody gets $2,000. So I know that one argument against this, people say, oh well, if people get money, then they're not going to go work because there's no motivation anymore. But I disagree with that completely, because you can still make more money if you go and work. So people always want more stuff, unfortunately. That's kind of, people are consumers. So people will work. But I think, just to address your particular point here, if we help people, if we give them like basic surviving money, they don't have to worry anymore about surviving the next day, because they got something. They already got some money to survive. And so then they have more time to become activists, because we need activists right now. This is a huge issue. There are people who know about climate change, but I don't know, for some reason they hide. They don't come out. They don't talk about it, and that's a shame, because we have YouTube, we have Facebook, we can talk about it.
Here also, I mean, one point that whenever there is a, environmental conference, so people they come up with, in petrol cars. I mean, what's the use? I mean, they are talking about the climate change, but they are coming with the, jets and the cars which are run by the non-renewable resources. That's one thing which we have to think out.
It's kind of called climate hypocrisy, because you basically say, okay, but look at you use light at home and you drive a car, but all of that is relatively useless, because at the end of the day it means that you don't want to do anything yourself, right? So we have to kind of accept certain things. Like right now we're making a video. I have some lights, as you can see. I have a heater going on because right now it's a little bit cold here. So
That's adaptation, isn't it? Because the human have to adapt according to the conditions, and that's adaptation will leads to evolution. Because we are also in the process of evolution. Like we came from Ramapithecus to now in the Homo sapiens, and we don't know after 100 years what would be our nature. Whether we become more barbaric than now, who will know? It's still unpredictable.
So that's actually a great point to transition to the next topic we have to talk today, and that's about GMOs. So first of all, I just want to say that myself, I don't know much about GMOs, so I don't want to like be one of those guys who, but I think the last time we had a conversation, you brought up some pretty valid points. And so, for example, what happens is if you got the Monsanto, right? They they develop certain types of grain, for example, and then the farmers have to first of all buy that grain, and then guess what happens? You get in those fields, you get weeds that grow. And to get rid of those weeds, you have to buy, I'm not kidding, you have to buy the Monsanto pesticide. So this is a great kind of marketing.
It's a loop. Yeah, it's a loop. It's a corporate loop where you have to, if you are involved there, you have to be there. Otherwise, you are losing money. That's what it's how it's run. And see, we are playing like God, so-called God, right? Who is having all the powers to manipulate nature, and that's our biggest arrogant nature, that whatever the things which is coming, that should be there in the natural state. If we try to manipulate too much of things, then obviously there would be diseases, there would be insect will be more resistant towards the natural conditions, and we will be having more losses. And many animals, they are going to get endangered, because you are breaking that cycle, the food chain which is being there in the nature. You are incorporating something, some genes which are breaking the whole overall food chain. So it's ultimately going to affect. So if I talk about GMO is just genetically modified organism. Why you have to, I understand that, to get the requirements of the population, which is growing every single second. To get that, you have to get quick remedies, and in that aspect, GMO is playing a vital role. But the point is about the ethical issue, how much you can modify the natural conditions. There should be some limit in it. And if you go beyond that limit, obviously there would be a lot of cases, just like Corona. We still are not sure about that, whether Corona, the mutated virus, it actually emerged from a lab, or it just naturally it came out all over the place and across. You see that how much effect it causes, not only in the public sector but economical sectors. Many people, they lost their jobs because of this 1 year total lockdown. So modification of the genes, it's all right for certain limit, but if you go beyond to do some, of your own women fancies to see that what happens, then in that case it's a very pretty bad scenario which you are putting into the environment. That's a load. You are giving a load to the environment. That's what I believe about the GMOs. It should be some ethical point where you should stop it.
So I just want to kind of point it out here for people who may be wondering, like, what are they talking about? There's kind of two distinctions to make here. There's one which, okay, we take, for example, a gene from one type of grain and we mix it with a gene of another type of grain. So this has been happening for a very long time, and people are trying to make them more heat resistant, more drought resistant, etc. More flood, maybe more flood resistant as well. I don't know. But what we're talking about here is that if they take an ability of a fish that is resistant to frost, for example, and they mix that with a grain, and so of course then people eat that, and it all gets mixed in our organism, and that can be very dangerous in itself. We don't really know the full effect of that. So
Yeah, we are just playing, as I said, we are just playing like God to manipulate the genes with our whims and fancies, and that's very hazardous. Like if we talk about the bt cotton, like bacillus thuringiensis cotton, which is a transgenic crop. So once it was released in the market and the fields, it was all right, but after some years it was seen that the farmers who were using the bt crops or bt cotton, they started developing allergies. So the long-term implications we still don't know when we are introducing any transgenic animal or plant into the nature, because what would be that particular animals or plants, behavioral changes in the nature, nobody can predict it. So that's one point of concern with respect to the whole environment which I am considering, that how much integration of this GMO should be there in nature. There should be some ethical committees which should figure it out, that if we are trying to, and at that should be vigilance. And without vigilance, if the corruption comes into place, then obviously those genes, those lethal genes, will go out into the nature and cause havoc, and that we don't want, right? So this is one point which I want to raise because it's pretty much related with the climate change.
So I found this one article, and I just wanted to get your opinion on it. This comes from the New York Times, and it talks about the concerns of GMOs. But here it says basically that according to an interview in Scientific American, which is a good source, by the way. Scientific American is a good source. It says here, so there's a plant molecular biologist at the University of California. He says that there are hundreds of millions of genetic experiments involving every type of organism on Earth, and people are eating billions of meals without a problem. That's what he says. So, do we just kind of take the scientist's word for it, or?
Right. I mean, for any system, there are two sides of always two sides. One is pros and another is con, right? The advantages and disadvantages. There, the scientists, whoever scientists who are actually talking about the different type of genetically modified organism, if they are introducing it, it leads to what you call, it leads to the fulfillment of the people's hunger. That's one point to look into it. I'm not denying it. It's yes, if you are putting a gene which is actually tolerant for cold into vegetables, so those vegetables can be grown into the Arctic region to fulfill the needs of the people, because people cannot grow over there the vegetables because of too much cold condition. I'm not denying the fact. I'm just saying that how much manipulation should be done. Like they said that lakhs and thousands of genetic manipulation, it's still being happening. And as far as media is concerned, media cannot go into the research lab to show all this aspect because it's being hidden, right? Media will always move around into the political scenario which is being happening across, so we don't get a clear picture what's happening. And suddenly one day it says that the bt corn is coming to the market, it is resistant towards the insects. So how much the lethal effect of that particular bt corn or any transgenic crop, it's been happening, it's being totally overlooked by the the media houses, right? So that one part I am not sure. And how many people they are reading about the scientific articles, scientific research, scientific post. I mean, if you in a country, if you are not rational, if you are not having the scientific bent of mind, then obviously you won't be discussing about these issues. And these are the grave issues which are running in background. We just think about it that it's a thing which is going and coming, but it's not. Ultimately, it's going to have a very lasting impact. So that's one part of, I think we should have the general awareness. That's what's being happening in our scientific laboratories, whether it's an American laboratory or whether it's an Indian laboratory. We should know about the things which are being happening.
When it regards to climate change, a lot of people say that well, some people are saying that, hey, it's not happening because right now outside it's cold. That is not how things work at all. The predictions never said that, hey, we're gonna have no more cold days. It's not what it says. It says that the number of cold days is going to decrease and the number of hot days is going to increase. And of course, the hot days are going to get hotter, and that's very dangerous because you can get droughts and you can get heat waves. And so people in Japan every year people die of heat waves. It's so bad here in summer. It's terrible. How in India, by the way, I know that obviously in northern India near the mountains it's probably quite cold, but in your area, what's the weather like? Is it usually quite hot?
Okay. That's very interesting question. If you talk about India as a whole, we are in such a geographical location that we can see the snow, right, and we can also see the hot deserts, all kind of from a maximum temperature of around 50 degrees Celsius to minimum temperature of minus 20 degrees Celsius. We have that range. So, I mean, if you go into the northern part of India, then you see that it's cold. Like if we go to the Kashmir side, it's cold over there because that's in. But if you go to the south, it's very hot. I mean, if you talk about Tamil Nadu, there's a place called as state called as Tamil Nadu, and that's it's blistering hot there, right? So we and the present location where I am staying, that's called as Bangalore. And Bangalore, it's such a fascinating climate. That's throughout the year you have the temperature range of around 28 degrees Celsius to 34 degrees Celsius. That's where it's fluctuating throughout the year. So we see all kind of seasonal changes which is being happening throughout. But the main point with respect to the climate change, the places which were hot, they are getting hotter, and that's the concern which we are actually dealing with. Like in case of Kashmir, if we talk about previously the present place which I'm if I'm taking about my place only, Bangalore, which is Bangalore. Previously the temperature fluctuation was around 24 to 28, 29 degrees Celsius, but now it is reaching to 35 degrees Celsius. So you can think about that how much changes are being happening, and it's very in a very rapid rate. We still don't know, after 10 years or so we may touch the point of 40 degrees Celsius, and that's very unimaginative thing for in a place like Bangalore, because Bangalore it fluctuates between 35. So yes, it's increasing and that's being happening. So that's one part which I want to mention, that yes, it's been happening, and every single year the temperature is soaring its new height.
So we talk about this is kind of interesting point here. We talk about public awareness, and a lot of even professional scientists have tried to communicate the problem. They did their best. They showed you graphs and images, etc. Some people understand it, some people kind of accept it, and some people just kind of don't care. So I think this is, again, going back to what we talked before. It goes back to this problem that everybody is consumed by the work culture. We go to work, we are tired after work, so we don't have any energy to think about environmental problems or anything like that. So how would you solve that problem?
Yeah, I mean, there are some pointers which we can think in a highly populated country like us. I mean, we have some, very good transport systems. So instead of using the own private vehicles, we can actually use the public transport. A country is developed not because how many cars it's having, but how many people are actually using the transport system, public transport system. That defines the developed or developing countries. So that one part which I want to focus on. Second part is that how much the science teacher know about science. That's one part I want to tell about. If they believe that it's not climate change is happening, but it's all right, we have to get the more income rather than telling the students that what's actually happening. And there creates that gap, because if the people from the very if the children are not aware that what's happening around them, so obviously they would be having a very easy hand that okay, it's a normal thing. I mean, temperature comes and goes, but long term effect what it is going to have. So education system plays a very vital role to understand and to be aware. And the science teachers, selection of science teachers, I would think the system should be such like that science teachers are objective and rational. They should not be believe in hoax that climate change is a hoax. Okay, that's one part which I want to focus on. So there are 2 points. And third thing is that how much minimum resource you can use to spend your life peacefully. That's very important, because we think that more amount of money, so more amount of resources we will buy and more happiness. But exactly this is not how the proportionate thing goes in the world. It's actually creating disproportionate or imbalance. So in little resources, how you can actually use it for your betterment, and also to think about the future, that if I conserve the resources now, it's going to help my future generation. So that how you are going to convey this message to the people by writing articles. That's the best way to do that. If you write articles and then publish it in some of the newspapers, that would give a lot of awareness to the people, that how we can conserve the. And obviously this kind of videos, this kind of discussion, always when we put it into the social platform, then it makes the people to think that okay, fine, some people do talk about it and it's very important to discuss about it, rather than just sitting in the sitting in home, thinking about when I'm going in the next morning, what kind of job I am doing. Okay, so those things we have to think. So three major things which I want to tell: the rapid and the rational education system, the usage of the public transport more often, and third thing is that to get awareness with involvement with the local people who are actually working with the climate change activities which are happening around.
Okay, so yeah, you actually laid out the solutions there. I just want to mention here that I just finished shooting my climate change course. It's called Epic, a climate change course. And check it out when it's done. It's going to be available, I think, at the end of February on Listenable, which is just audio format. And then I'm going to do it in video format for Udemy at some point in the future. And it's an interesting course because, again, I am not a scientist. I try to. The problem, like, okay, what I'm trying to say is here is that the problem sometimes when you talk to a scientist is that they start to talk in very complicated language and use a lot of math, and for some people they just disconnect immediately. And the whole point of my course was to try to explain the topic as just someone who understands the topic, who reads about the topic, but who is not a scientist. So check it out, it's very interesting. When we talk about solutions to the future, I would say that the solutions depend on your economic status. Because, for example, one of the solutions is, okay, you can try to have an electric vehicle, but not everybody even has access to a regular vehicle. So we have to be realistic here. When it comes to small scale solutions, I would say that things like changing light bulbs is a good thing, and maybe rethinking how you cook your food, because maybe some people use coal, and maybe you can try to do something different. When it comes to middle class people, then you can start to think about things like electric vehicles. You can start thinking about maybe changing your fridge or washing machine or air conditioner because you can afford it basically. And then for the kind of higher scale solutions, we really have to, because when we talk about climate change, it's a lot of to do with CO2 emissions. And CO2 emissions mostly come from energy. We have to use energy at home, energy at work, energy in the industry, and transportation as well. We really have to take on three major players here. Number one, the agriculture industry. Number two, the energy industry. And the third one is the transportation industry. So I think if we can tackle these three somehow, we'll be in a good shape. But right now it's kind of slow going, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to know your point of view. If you are introducing the fourth point, which is how much vegetarianism is impacting, because shall the people who are actually eating the food as they are eating, or they should modify or change their eating patterns? If you see the general scenario, what would be your take?
I would agree that it's from like the things I said, it would be a good fourth point. Yeah, I would say it's very fair. Yeah.
Right. I mean, consumption or maybe an alternative form of food, non-veg, meal, that would be a thing. But how much palatable, how much tasty, that would be again a question mark. Because if they are serving again the GMOs, then it's not going to solve the problem. So, as far as eating is concerned, I mean that point, it's very abstract because people would love to. People normally hang out and they love to eat. So even if you put some restriction in that particular eating habits, I don't see where it's going. I mean that's very abstract for me. Whether you are imposing some kind of bans on a red meat or not, consumption of red meat or not. As far as in US and Europe is concerned, because they are taking too much of red meat, so there should be some limit of consumption. I think so. As far as India is concerned, there is no such, there is a limitation of intake of red meat. So how it's going to impact the environment is still a question mark as far as European and US countries are concerned.
Who cares? We kill some pigs, we kill some cows, and nobody's responsible because it's human nature.
Right, we are omnivorous. We are in the category of omnivorous. So, uh, I mean, I'm not still sure that I can change my diet or not from fully non-vegetarian meal to vegetarian meal. It should be very difficult for me. But if you are talking about the climate change, yes, we have to think about it. Reducing the consumption would be one thing we can do it.
And I found this one interesting thing actually, because we talked about population a little bit, but I just want to bring it back just for the final segment of our video here. Because population, some people say, well, it's not really a big deal because the big problem is corruption and mismanagement of resources. But I kind of disagree with that because we are people, we consume. So the Our World in Data website, which is also a good website to track coronavirus, by the way, they are part of Oxford University group, so I would say it's a pretty good reputation. They have an equation here, and the equation says total CO2 emissions equals population times CO2 emissions per person. That's how they calculate it. So this is basically what they're talking about here is our carbon footprint. We all have a carbon footprint. This is how much we consume. The population in most countries is actually getting flat. So in Japan, it's decreasing. In most of Europe, it's decreasing. In China, it's kind of flat. In India, it's flat.
In our country, there are also many stigmas, like uh, when you talk about population, there are many hurdles. Many of the people are not aware of the sexually transmitted diseases and, unprotected sex. That's again one point. And then a third thing is that sometimes they say it's gift of God, so we should accept it. So that religious factors also come into being, because we are the country of many religions, and we don't have any uniform civil code for all the religions to follow. So religions follow their own codes here, and in that aspect, there are many. And the second important thing is that when the population increases, it also increasing the corruption rate, because you have to fight for the resources. So those who have capital, they will just spend and then get the resource, right? That's one part. And so corruption is also equivalent to the population, which we can see here. So, and there is another problem of reservation problem. I mean, reservation is another problem which which is right or wrong, it's still debatable in a huge country like India. We do give some reservation to particular communities. So, how much they are benefiting from that reservation is still a question mark. So there are a lot of problems, and population, yes, it affect the global climate change.
So basically, we kind of went over many points here. I hope people find it interesting because there's a lot of information in this video. Do you have anything else to add here?
I mean, we reached to a point where we agree with the things that the climate change is real. It's not hoax. With a lot of information we have just input now, I mean, in this today's session, I mean, people can think about it that how they can modify their lifestyle to get a better future. That's what I hope with this video. If our message is clear, then they can actually think that what steps they can take in their own small scale to give a large scale impact to the environment. That's what I believe, and I think that's from my side. I have had a very good discussion with you.
Same here. And now I want to finish off with a very interesting point about this video. So usually people prepare a lot of material for each video, and I just want to say that actually this is the first time today, right now, that I talked to Saurav.
We are living in two different countries, but the idea behind doing this session is same, that yes, climate change is happening and we should discuss what is happening in your country, how much effective the government is in tackling the problem, and also what's happening in my country and how the government is dealing with it. So we get a perspective that what's happening in your country and my country, and can we reach into a common goal where we can follow the easy rules and procedures to have a impactful life and impactful future for our next generation. So that's this is the first kind, I am also doing that. I mean, a very good friend from Japan is actually talking about climate change.
That was awesome. That was great. And if people watch this video, if a lot of people watch it and a lot of people like it, we may make some more videos here. How about that?
Yes, I would be excited to have some discussion with related to climate or nature, because that's what I am also, engaged with. Studies, nature, and photography. These are the three things which I love.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. So anyway, I hope people enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for more. If people like it, we'll make some more. So thanks for watching. Bye bye from me.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.